Hi, I'm Christy Johnson. Thanks so much for joining our first episode here on Giving Tree Surrogacy's podcast called Bump to Bond. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Tara Custra, the surrogate intake manager, as well as Sarah Wright, the surrogate outreach manager, for our first episode to discuss what is gestational surrogacy. So thank you for joining and welcome to both of you. Everyone here is an experienced surrogate, and today we're going to be talking about what is gestational surrogacy and what did that look like being a gestational surrogate. So kind of off the bat, I just want to explain a little bit about what gestational surrogacy is compared to what others may know as traditional surrogacy. So gestational surrogacy is where the surrogate carrying the baby is not genetically related to the baby. That is most types of surrogacy that we talk about today. Traditional surrogacy, that is where the surrogate is using her egg. And so she does have a biological connection to the baby. Again, I think the last time I heard about a traditional surrogacy case was maybe 30 plus years ago. So it's really gestational surrogacy that we're talking about today. And I think that surrogacy is finally starting to really be in conversation more. People are learning more about it. I know on the ASRM website, they have cited from resources that there's 1 in 6 people in the world that is affected by infertility. And that doesn't include members of the LGBTQ plus community that require a surrogate in order to have a family. And so even advancements with egg donation and egg freezing and genetic testing before implantation of an embryo have started to advance and give people opportunities to have a baby. Like I said, everyone here is a surrogate and has completed at least one journey. I think Sarah's completed multiple journeys. So I'd like you to both kind of introduce yourselves and what brought you to surrogacy. How did you learn about surrogacy? How did it get introduced to your life? And how did you take that first step?
Well, my name is Sarah, like you said, and I am the manager of the surrogate outreach team. I did my first surrogacy over a decade ago, and I have completed 4 journeys, bringing 5 babies into this world for other parents. And I will be honest with you, I'm not sure how surrogacy came into my life, but I'm so thankful it did. But my passion for pregnancy, family building, started from a really young age. I was lucky enough to have a midwife as a mother who really just valued the work that a woman's body can do. And so it's never been something that I've taken for advantage of or, not really focused on, is that my body can do amazing things. And I'm happy to give that gift to others when I can. So
That's amazing. Tara, how about you? I think you've done one journey as well.
Yes. So I'm Tara. I am the manager of the surrogate intake department here at Giving Tree. Yes, I've also done one surrogacy. It was in 2019. She was born in early 2020. And I came to surrogacy in a similar way as Sarah. I had fairly easy pregnancies. I got pregnant pretty much on the first try, both times. Everything was pretty easy. The births themselves were easy. And I just know so many people in my life, family, friends, acquaintances, so many people that really struggled to get pregnant. I know a lot of people who went through multiple rounds of IVF. And I just thought that if I can do this easily myself, I would love to be able to have everybody experience what it's like to, have a family and have children. And I thought that that was one way that I could help people. So that's kind of where I came into this field.
A little bit of background about my journey. I carried twins in 2014. My sister had ovarian cancer when she was 9. And so I grew up knowing, as I got older, that meant that she wouldn't be able to carry a baby for herself. That was before the times of mentioning egg freezing to patients that were about to go through chemo and radiation. Ultimately, she had surgery as well, so she physically wasn't able to carry. But now, like I said, there have been advancements, and people are talking about freezing their eggs before going through any kind of treatment to potentially have a biological baby in the future for themselves. In her situation, like I said, that was many years ago. And so I thought that after having my kids that I might carry for her. And we had a conversation about it, and she had decided not to pursue that and becoming a parent. And she is a proud aunt, and she's a registered nurse. And so she's found ways to give back in her life. And so we're really proud of her. But that's kind of what brought me to surrogacy. It still was just on my heart to do that for someone else. And so then, 2 babies later, that happened. And it really just, I think, changed my life. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of explain it as that there's, aside from having your own kids, no greater high. I feel like I will never top that achievement in my life. To really feel like I was a part of something bigger than myself. And for a while, I spent time trying to chase that and landed in this industry to work in this industry. And that's my way of kind of being a part of that, and in a small way of helping others achieve that goal for themselves to help others. And so that's just something that has stuck with me long term. And like I said, I don't think I'll ever top that. Did you guys feel that after, and that transition into normal life or regular life after being a surrogate, and find that nothing's as bright for a while?
I mean, I went on to do multiple journeys to still enjoy that love and that expression, and now get to work in this industry. And I did something unique after, not unique, but something that made that journey kind of last longer, is I provided breast milk, both to the babies I carried, but to NICUs and other intended parents, to really just continue that joy of giving and that warmness that comes from doing something for someone else.
Yeah, that's amazing. How about you, Tara?
And I always tell everybody that I will never forget the moment of like the baby being born, and the mother behind me, behind my head, and she's jumping up and down and saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And it's just one of my favorite memories of my life. And anytime I think about it or talk about it, it makes me tear up, because it was just so amazing. And I was so grateful that I got to provide that for her.
I think one of the things that when I got started in pursuing surrogacy was I was naive to the process. I knew what it was. I kind of knew a little bit about it, but I didn't even, I think, realize that there was an application process. I just thought, I'm someone who wants to help and other people need help. So that's great. Like, I will just get started and be a surrogate. And that's not really the case. There are things that women have to go through to apply and qualify to be a surrogate. So first, I'll start with Sarah. She can kind of walk us through what it looks like to qualify candidates, and what makes a good surrogate candidate in your eyes.
Absolutely. I mean, that is my main job, is to review applications as well as to meet and go through the medical and social history of women who are considering surrogacy as an option for them, their family. I always say my job is to educate and advocate. And part of that is going through their personal history to make sure that surrogacy is a safe and legal option. And so it's a pre-screening. Of course, I don't make those final decisions. But some of the main factors we look at are your pregnancy history. Did you have safe, uncomplicated pregnancies, deliveries? Looking at mental health, your age, your BMI, and other factors of your health history that might impact your ability to safely carry as a gestational surrogate. We also look at social aspects as well as, do you have a good support system in place? Are the people in your life going to support you on this journey? That's often our partners or our immediate family that might care for our children. If we say needed to go to an appointment or something else in our life, really just that emotional aspect as well. So do we have people who are behind us in this process? As an agency, we're going to be behind you, but having your own people as well is so makes the journey so much smoother.
Yeah, I think that's really an important piece that you bring up, because I know people that have said to me that they wanted to become a surrogate, but their spouse was not on board, was too nervous, or just didn't want to go through the process. And so they weren't able to move forward with that. I remember telling my husband that I submitted an application, and it was probably at midnight, when I'm just scrolling and, and thinking, that I'm just going to take the leap. And so I told him about it the next day. And I think his response, he knew my sister's, story and background and everything. So I don't think that he was super surprised, but was a little surprised to hear that I had just gone for it, like in the middle of the night. And so we did have that conversation after, and I made sure that he was on board, and I don't think he was surprised, but that's a unique situation, and not every partner is on board, I guess. What were your husband's reactions to, you bringing this up to them? Tara, how about you?
Well, mine is also pretty unique. When we first discussed it, it was right after my second child was born, and we had talked about it, and it never really became anything serious. And then when we decided that we were done having kids, we debated having a third, but we decided to stick with our two beautiful girls that we have. He actually brought it back up to me and said, well, if you still want to do surrogacy, maybe this is the time we should look into it. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Let's do it. And so we kind of were in the process together from the start. So that was really awesome to have his support. He just wanted, his only concern was that once we got to the legal phase, or if anything happened in the pregnancy, that like my life would be prioritized, I guess, over anything else that happened. And as a surrogate, that's typically what happens. So he was okay with that. And then we moved forward.
What about you, Sarah?
My story is probably more similar to yours, Christy, in the sense that I randomly signed up for it without doing any research, not having any knowledge other than I love being pregnant. I love delivering babies. And my husband, being who he is, he's just like, whatever you want, sweetheart. For him, he was going to support me no matter what. But what really changed for him is when we met our intended parents for that first journey, is hearing their story, putting a face to this journey, not just an idea of my wife's going to be pregnant, my wife's going to deliver another baby, and that baby's not coming home with us, but hearing their story. And then it was not just she's going to be pregnant, she's doing something, and we as a family are doing something that's going to help these people. And that changed it, I think, a lot for him, is that putting a face to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So Tara, how would you describe what you do? What makes a good surrogate candidate in the intake phase of a journey where a surrogate is working on building their profile, we're getting their medical records, and kind of what we know clinics are looking for in order to get a medical pre-approval and a profile built for her that intended parents would view?
Right. So in the surrogate intake department, our job is to qualify. So Sarah's job is to pre-qualify, and our job is to basically make sure that the surrogates are medically qualified, psychologically qualified. So we gather all of their medical records. We review them in-house, and we also have them reviewed externally by registered nurses who are in the IVF and delivery, birthing fields. And our biggest concern is that we want somebody who's going to reduce the amount of risk to intended parents as possible. Surrogacy is all about reducing risks because as an intended parent, they've been through multiple different things, rounds of IVF. Maybe they had cancer themselves. Maybe they had something traumatic happen that they can't have a pregnancy or carry a pregnancy anymore. And so they're usually turning to surrogacy as a last resort. And so we want to make sure that, we're reducing the amount of risk that they have in choosing this person to be their surrogate. So we look through their medical records. We make sure that there was no, what word am I looking for?
Pregnancy complications that she
Complications,
experienced.
yes.
Yeah.
That's jumped out of my brain. Complications, yes. So lots of surrogates, lots of women who are pregnant might have high blood pressure at the end of a pregnancy, and that's okay. That's normal. But if it would turn into, say, preeclampsia or severe hypertension, then that's a risk that most clinics won't take. So we look for things like that. Another complication that's common is gestational diabetes. If you had diet controlled, if you were able to control it just by altering your diet, that's okay. We can work with that. But if you had to take medications, or in my personal experience with my surrogacy, I had to take insulin for my gestational diabetes. So I was unfortunately disqualified from moving forward with another surrogacy because, clinics won't qualify somebody who had that sort of complication in their records. So we look for things like that. We look at past medical history, any mental health history that shows up in your records, medications that you might be taking, things like that. So my team's really focusing on the medical aspect. And once your records are approved, then we work with the surrogates to build their profiles and help them make it as exciting and as open and honest as it can be, so that intended parents get a really good idea of what you are like as a person, and they'll want to meet you and work with you.
I think that's such a fun part of the process is building a profile. So intended parents and surrogates have profiles, and those are exchanged with the other party. So that's a time to actually show your personality behind your name. And like what Sarah said, this is such a personal experience. And I remember getting my first intended parent profile, and that's actually the intended parents or IPs that I ended up working with. I saw their profile and fell in love with them. And I remember sharing with my coworkers at the time. I was so excited of like, I just got my first profile. I'm like just staring at their photos and the background of the photos, like, oh, where were they on that vacation or anything like that. And it was just such an exciting time to put a face to the name and think, I'm actually here at this point. These are real people that I'm truly going to be a part of changing their life, and they're going to change mine. And it was just so exciting. So that's a great time, like you said, to be honest about who you are, the expectations of things like communication. How often do you want to communicate? How involved do you want the IPs to be in the journey? How often do you want to talk to them? And vice versa. They will say the same. And so I love that part of a journey. It's like the exciting time, I think. Do you guys remember seeing your IP profiles and what were your thoughts?
Well, absolutely. each of their profiles were unique, and each journey was unique. But I remember with one of my intended parents, they had photos specifically from Disney. And we're a big Disney family. That's actually the gift I've given my children after each of my surrogates is either a week at Disneyland or a week at Disney World to
Oh my
celebrate.
gosh. They're like, mom can be a surrogate every year.
Yes, no one was sad about their gift, but it was so nice to see that. And I actually have in my office here of a pair of Mickey ears that those same intended parents got me from their trip right after we met, and they mailed it to me. It was like the sweetest little gift. And I keep it in my office as a reminder of that connection that a simple picture created for us.
Sarah, do you remember seeing your IP profile? Did you match with your first IPs, or did it take a few profiles?
No, I matched with my first IPs. Theirs was more written as a letter and with, photos attached at the end. And I really, felt drawn to them through the letter that the mom wrote. They had already had a daughter through surrogacy. She was just born. She was maybe 1. And so I was giving them the opportunity to grow their family, which was exciting. And I liked that they had already been through the process and could kind of help guide me since I was newer. And they didn't live too far from me too, which I really enjoyed. We were able to drive to the clinic, and so yeah, and we got to meet them in person a few times, and so that was really nice. So yeah,
I love
it was just the first one. Yeah.
Well, I think, if we can kind of talk about after a surrogate applies and she does meet these qualifications that we're talking about and is qualified, when we reference the medical approval, we're speaking about the IVF clinics. So the intended parents will choose the IVF clinic that they're working with. And so it's important for the surrogate to be approved by the physician at the IVF clinic that they're working with. And I know surrogates will ask all the time, where do I go for all of this? How do I match with parents that don't live in my town? It's not local. How does all of this work? And so I think if we can kind of talk through, just the basics of the travel involved, and then what happens after the transfer. So I think, just going through the IVF process, when a surrogate is approved by the intended parents clinic that they're working with, she will attend an in-person medical screening. So they have already reviewed her medical records from her previous pregnancies, and they will do a physical, typically an ultrasound, blood work, and other lab work at the IVF clinic. So the agency will arrange her travel so that she attends that appointment and then travels home, typically that same day. It's a very quick trip. So if she happens to be local to that clinic, she can drive. Otherwise, the agency would arrange flights and hotel if needed. And then after she's medically approved, she would begin her IVF medications. So that's another thing that women often ask about are injections. Do I have to do injections? I got pregnant very easily on my own. And so could I just do a natural cycle? I know you guys have been asked that too. And there are some clinics that do natural cycles, but a majority of clinics do want to do injections so that they can have real control over the timing, and she will monitor locally to her and track kind of how her body is responding to the medications before she travels back to the IVF clinic for the embryo transfer. How we can kind of stop. I know that was a lot, but going back to injections, how did you feel about injections? Obviously, nobody is like thrilled about needles. I do have a crazy story about that actually. During my cycle, the clinic provides your medication, and then there are needles that you use to draw the medication from the vial. and then you switch to a different needle size to inject. And I kind of describe it as like in your flank area, like kind of the upper outer quadrant of your butt cheek is where you're doing injections typically in the
Yeah, so
muscle.
they told me if you put your hand backwards, if you put your hand on your hip, but then turn your fingers backwards where your fingers are, that's where you need to inject.
Yes.
That's how
And
I
my
always did it.
husband forgot to switch the needle size. So he injected with the large needle that you draw with. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like hurts so bad today. Like, what is going on? And then he just stops. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I forgot to switch the needle. And he's like, what do I do? Do I take it out? Like, and I just said, go for it. At this point, it's already in, like, just do the injection and get it over with. But that I think I had a big knot for quite some time. Luckily, my cycle was like yours, Terry. I know you said, one transfer it took. Thank God that I didn't have to do another medication cycle again, because those injections do last until you're about 10 weeks along. So I was really glad to be done with those injections. How did you, Sarah, how did you do, I think you said 4, do this 4 times, because it is, a sacrifice, and you can get knots and bruises, and it's a lot to put your body through. How did you manage all of it?
Yeah. So one of the things I always talk about when we're conducting that initial interview is the medication cycle. And that's where that education piece comes in for me. No one told me there was medications involved. And while I was naive, I should have known better. I, like many people, assumed my fertility impacted this. But the reality is we're not using my eggs. We're not using the gestational surrogates' eggs. So we do have to use medications. Even in a natural cycle, there are still medications involved in these. So I always take the time to educate people both on the hormones that we use. So that's oral birth control pills, estrogen, as well as those progesterone injections, because I never want someone to feel like, hey, no one warned me there was needles involved in this, because they definitely caught me off guard as well. Generally speaking, though, the clinics were great about providing us a cute little calendar that really mapped it out and simplified it. Instructional videos on how to take the medications, timing of days, as well as how to not inject yourself with the wrong needle. So how to draw up the vials, as well as like administering those. My husband was great and did most of those injections for me. Well, we can absolutely do them ourselves. Sometimes it's nice to have someone else so we don't have to look. But yeah, each cycle was a little bit different for me. I think the first one was the most intimidating because I had never given myself an injection before. I responded really well to the medications. I'm very thankful. I had very little side effects. The estrogen made me a little bit more moody, and the progesterone made me a little bit more sleepy. But generally speaking, like, I did really well with those medications. I just didn't love having to give a shot every time. So
I'll have to let my husband know that he's actually the only one that made that mistake.
he is not. I worked pharmacy for years, and it was a very common thing that we have to simplify instructions for needles used about this one does not go into your body. We use that term in other things that might come up in medications. Like, I know some people have suppositories as part of their medication cycles. They're not as common. But in the pharmacy, we had to very specifically write the word unwrap because of the amount of people who did not unwrap these medications before inserting them. A lot of people mistake these, but as a clinic, as an agency, as our support group, we try to help kind of simplify that because it's not common knowledge if you haven't done it before.
And that's what's great about the IVF clinic too, that their nurse staff, I know I called them a couple of times to just say, is this normal? Or did I do this right based on my calendar instructions? Just being a little bit overly paranoid of messing something up. And they're always really great. And so the surrogates have that, IVF clinic to reach out to for medical advice. Tara, how about you? How did your injections go? Any crazy stories or side effects that you experienced?
I think side effect wise, I was like Sarah. I didn't really notice any side effects. My husband also did the injections for me most of the time. The only crazy stories, my kids actually were really involved with my surrogacy. They were younger. They were probably like 6 and 4, but they were very involved and they loved watching, him do the shots and all this, and just every step of the way they were there. And we did have a couple times where we had a little bit of a geyser. Did you have one of those? Like when you take the needle out, the blood just kind of shoots across the room. We had, yeah. We did. That happened a few times. Yeah. Yes. And my kids always surprisingly thought it was funny. Not scary.
Like, we've got a bleeder. Yeah.
Definitely becomes a family event. I know I had my these infections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to take them while we were on vacation in the summer, and we had to stop at a rest stop on the way down because you have to take them at exactly the same time every day. So we did do some injections in rest stop bathrooms. And then we stayed over one night in a hotel before we got to our vacation house. And that one specifically was one of the geyser days. So it was like all over the hotel wall. I said, oh no, they're going to think something crazy happened.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, other than that, I can't remember anything too crazy.
I mean, that's the thing is that, we're all surrogates are moms. They're living life, they're working jobs, or they're a stay-at-home mom. Either way, life goes on through a journey and things happen. And so, like you said, you took your medications with you on the road and had some good laughs, and housekeeping may have questioned what was going on in that room. But my kids were 5 and 2 at the time of my journey, and especially being pregnant with twins, my daughter was the young one, and so she just, I think, thought that I was the size of a house. I was huge, and so I think she thought I was just absolutely gigantic. And my son was more involved and curious and would talk to the dads on video and things like that sometimes. And so yeah, I love that the kids are curious. And, that was a question that I would get asked a lot. I live in a small town, and I think some people struggle with the concept of being a surrogate and how that affects your children. And I would be asked, how are you explaining that to your kids, that they're not going to get a sibling that's coming home from the hospital? And they framed it as it was a negative thing that I was doing to my kids, that I was almost teasing them with a sibling that they weren't going to have or something. So that was an interesting thing that I didn't expect and I wasn't really prepared for in my journey. And I viewed it as the total opposite, that, from a young age, I'm teaching my children that family can look different and that's okay. And love is love. And so we can, if we are able to help people, then we do. And it's teaching them empathy and understanding other situations that don't look like ours. So they weren't able to, have a loving family and create that on their own. They need help doing that. And so I think it was a really beautiful thing to include my kids. And as they got older, to continue that lesson and that narrative. Did either one of you experience any weird questions about your kids or not bringing home the baby?
I was just going to say, whenever we would be out and people would ask questions, my kids were the ones that answered oh, this isn't our baby. She's carrying it for somebody else. And they were very involved the whole time. And my youngest daughter somehow came up with the name Star Baby. So that's what we called the baby the whole time, was Star Baby. And we still call her Star. Like, I'll say, oh, look, I got a picture from Star today. And we always were really involved, and really, she used to talk to my stomach and say Star. But at the end of the pregnancy, my mom laughs because or my dad, actually, he always laughs because he's like, it was the very end. I was getting ready to be induced. And I was just really, you're at the end of pregnancy, you're big, you're tired. And he said, I'll never forget the one day she put her face on your belly and yelled, Star, get out. Like, it's time to go.
Yeah, time to go. That's so cute.
So, yeah.
Sarah,
I don't think we
ever
really got any.
Yeah. I mean, we got, with as many journeys as I've done, we've had a lot of really positive comments from people, but sometimes off the wall comments. As my children got older, they were very quick to correct people like, that's not ours. We're not going to do that. Every once in a while, I did have to learn to get a thicker skin. During a couple of my journeys, we were also foster parents, which meant that I would walk through a store heavily pregnant with a lot of children who did not necessarily look like me. And I would get some foul comments about some people should stop having babies, things like that, which was a little bit hard for my children to hear such things when they were so young. But generally speaking, my children advocated for themselves. There was no confusion. They understand it so much from a young age that genetics doesn't make a family, carrying a baby doesn't make a family. Families can be made in so many different ways. And my teenage girls are so much more accepting of all family types than I ever would have been at that age, just being around it. And I'm so thankful for what they have learned, which is not to assume how families are made or what their family dynamic is, but to only be loving and accepting of their friends, of their parents, of however their family is made. So if nothing else, they have learned something that I would never have learned in my youth. So
I think that just speaks to the, just the ripple effect of going through a surrogacy journey. It's not just the intended parents that have the happy ending and go home with a baby or babies, that, the lasting impact goes far beyond just that baby being born. It's also on the surrogate side, for not only the surrogate herself, but potentially a partner or spouse, and your own child or children. Just the lasting impact. It's really incredible to hear those stories and those experiences. So that's amazing.
I mean, and I think as a surrogate too, it also affects, I mean, at least my journey, it affected my whole extended family, my parents, my in-laws, my brother, my sister-in-law. Everybody was really supportive, really excited about the journey. They met the intended parents. The intended parents, met them. We all got to kind of see the baby the next day after she was born. And so it was like a whole family thing that I did, that, we did. So it can,
that's a great
ripple
point.
Effects too.
Yeah. The couple that I cared for is an international couple. And so it really, was culturally enriching for both of us too, because, just that gave us something more to talk about. What does life look like in your country? What does day to day look like? Because it's so different, and just learning and having that perspective outside of my own bubble and my own small community, that, like you said, my extended family learned from that too. So we went through what injections look like. Once you become pregnant, that's another thing that we're asked often. Do I get to choose my doctor? And the answer is yes to that. I was really excited to talk to my doctor about becoming a surrogate. I wanted to work with her again throughout another pregnancy, that I didn't want to have another child of my own. But I was really excited to work with her again, and had such a great relationship. And I was her first surrogate patient. And so that was a unique experience, I think, for her too, and the staff. And I got a lot of positive feedback from them about just being excited to make sure that the intended parents are informed, and aware of things in the pregnancy that are going on that I shared with them, but they also had access to that information through my doctor after signing a release, that she could share things with them, and then the hospital staff too, to make sure that it was a comfortable experience for them when the babies arrived. Um, I know, Sarah, you said your mom is a midwife, so I would love to hear about what that experience was like when she found out that you were doing this. Did you go to her for care, or like, what
I
did
did
that look
not. She was not local to me. But I think that kind of goes back to like our profiles, right? Like I had a very specific request in my profiles, is that because of my background and who I was raised by, midwifery care was something that is not standard for most women, but it was something that was important to me for my journey, if medically safe, of course. Um, and so my profile highlighted that unique approach to delivery and prenatal care for that. But of course, I relied on my mother for talking about things as through that process. So it's nice. It's very important for us to feel safe in the providers that we choose, as well as ensuring that our intended parents have like-minded views. So if you're very adamant that this is going to be my OB, it's great to share that early on in the process so that we know that that intended parent is also excited to work with that OB or that hospital, because a lot of people have very strong opinions in this process for sure. Just my opinions are way too strong, I'm sure. So
No, you found perfect matches, and it's a win-win for everyone. And I think just being open up front is really important through the process.
absolutely.
Right. And it's a journey for the surrogates too. It's not, I mean, it is a lot about the intended parents, but it's also, you have to, it's also the surrogates. So everybody has to be comfortable in what you're doing through the journey together.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there ways that Tara, I'll direct this at you first. Are there ways that you intentionally tried to include your intended parents, or certain things that you did to have them feel included in the pregnancy, and bond with the intended parents?
Yeah. My hospital system wouldn't allow FaceTime or videos usually of this ultrasounds, but you would get the recordings after. So I would send them to them as soon as I got them. One of the things that I liked to do just for fun was I took the bump pictures every week, every month, different things, and I would send them pictures as my bump was growing. I guess weekly. I did the weekly pictures, and then they had the little stickers you could put on. It says, this week is I don't a tomato. It was compared to
Oh
fruits and
yeah,
vegetables. So I would make little
right.
stickers and send them pictures every week, and they would always get really excited to see the difference. Sometimes, if there was a big difference, I would do a collage for them. I did send their older daughter Christmas gift, like big sister stuff. Um,
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
and then she did come in. The mother was able to come, and she actually stayed at our house. I forgot about that. Now thinking back on it, she stayed at our house, and we went to the 20-week ultrasound together, where they do the sizing and the gender reveal and things like that. So she was able to come and do that in person with me. So I tried to just message them as often as possible and keep them in the loop of everything going on.
Yeah, with my IPs, they, like I said, were international. And so I went to one of those specialty ultrasound places because it was the same thing of not being able to record ultrasounds. Most places, I think, don't let you. But so I went to find out the genders and then had the IPs join live. So they were able to live stream and find out at the same time as me that they were having two boys. And so that was really special to be able to include them, even though they were international, that we could still have that moment together. And so I, I just tried to find ways that they could be included, even though they weren't local to me. And the other thing that they did was record themselves reading stories and even speaking Hebrew, so that I could play that for the twins. And so we would put like headphones on my belly and watch them move and listen to the dads talking. And so that was just a way that we could include them. And I felt like it was important for them to hear their voices because they're hearing my voice and my dogs barking and, the chaos of my house and my family. And I just wanted them to hopefully find their voices soothing and familiar when they were born. Sarah, did you have any special ways to include IPs or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, and again, each journey was so unique. The first one, the intended parents were able to come to every single appointment, every ultrasound, every well visit. They were able to palpitate their own baby. The midwife would allow them to kind of feel their own baby, which is a weird experience if you've never put your hands on a belly and was actually able to feel a head or a hiney. So it was nice that they were able to kind of really be hands-on for that. And my next intended parents, they were not local. They came for big appointments. They have belly pictures. I know I did a pregnancy belly photo for them where they was painted. My belly was actually painted by someone else. We could cut in cool. Things. I think I did a Build-A-Bear with their heartbeats in it because of that pregnancy with twins. And I tried to just include them as much or little as they want, since each intended parent and their stories and what led them to surrogacy is so different. My next intended parents, they were incredibly involved, and though they weren't local again, their dad actually, the dads caught their own baby. So can't get more involved than that, letting them be the first person to hold their daughter. And then just, trying to include, whatever it was that kept them involved in that process. So it was just updates, if it was pictures, if it was, clinical reports from the provider, images, whatever made them feel more comfortable, because what each intended parent needs is so different. And some don't need a lot. They just want general updates. So
yeah,
but the cute stuff sure is fun.
And how do you feel like the delivery went? I know, Sarah, that's several deliveries to talk through and different experiences. But a frequently asked question would be, how do you give up the baby? That's kind of, I would say, probably the number one question I get asked was, how did you give up the babies? And I know we've all kind of had the same response, I think, is that they were not our babies to give up. As we said, with gestational surrogacy, we don't have a biological link to the babies. And so that kind of comes full circle, right? Like at delivery, that this is not genetically my baby. And I think even throughout the entire pregnancy, having the IPs to go to after every appointment, it wasn't my husband that I was updating, not that I wasn't updating him, of course, but I couldn't wait to tell the IPs, this is how big they are. This was their heart rates and those updates. And so I think from the get-go, it was just so ingrained that this is not my baby. And I think I couldn't wait to have the the peak moment is delivery and seeing them with their baby or with their babies at the end. And so that's kind of my response. Do you have other things that you add to that response to clarify to people that it isn't a loss of the surrogate at delivery, that it's actually, I think, closure, and it's kind of the biggest moment of the journey itself?
So I will always use my personal experiences because it's what I've lived. I know when I first started my first journey, I had no idea how am I like, is this going to be emotional? Am I going to feel all these feelings? And just like it changed it for my husband when they met the intended parents, it changed it for me. I knew that I'm protecting their child for the time that they need that help, but I'm just babysitting. I'm here to love them, take care of them, just like I would if I was babysitting someone's child, keeping them safe, doing everything that I can. But I also like to use the example of my time in foster care is that I knew that baby I carried or babies I carried were safe and loved. And I never shed a tear because I knew where they were going. And I chose the family I carried for versus within like foster care. I cried every time a baby left my house because I didn't know where they were going. I didn't know if they were going to be safe. I didn't know what the rest of their life was going to look like. And it's so different with surrogacy. We choose who we help. We're not doing these for just somebody behind a screen. We're choosing the family, especially here at Giving Tree. You interview, you meet them, you see their profile, and you make the decision. And that changes everything, at least in my opinion, is making the choice yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when you go into it, you already are knowing that you are like, just like you said, babysitting. It's extreme babysitting. And you know that it's not your baby. And you go into this knowing that you're going to give the baby to the parents, to their parents. So it wasn't, I'd never had any thoughts or hesitations or issues with it at all. And I used to tell people that I started an Instagram just to kind of follow the journey so I could share it with people who were curious. And I called it I'm Just the Oven. And so I would tell people that I'm just the oven. This isn't my baby. I'm just carrying it and growing it and keeping it safe for the parents when it's ready to go back to its parents. So that's how I always explained it.
And now we get to see more journeys on this side of things, all the journeys happening with Giving Tree, with, you know, being a part of moving women up forward and knowing what they're about to experience. And they don't quite know, but we do. And it's just really exciting for them. And same with intended parents that sign on. And just, I think the knowledge of our experience and going through it and knowing what's ahead and in store for them is so exciting, and just such a unique perspective, I think, that we have and offer.
And sharing our stories with each other through our support groups, but also recognizing that everyone's perspective and journey and how their journeys come to be and may be different. We have access to mental health care providers. So not only at the pre-screening at the beginning, but if in your journey you need more, if you're not processing it in the way that you thought, like, we advocate for you to use those resources. It's not a failure. It's not, you're not doing well. It's recognizing that I'm not sure how I'm going to process this. I want to get ahead of it. And we provide those resources so that no one feels something that they shouldn't be feeling or that they could have avoided. So that's an amazing resource that I don't think we talk about enough, is that there's support beyond just us as the agencies or us as other surrogates, but trained medical professional that we will help connect you with.
Yes. And the surrogacy community, it's grown so much since I did my journey. I didn't know anyone that was going through it at that time. And so it was a unique experience, but I think I would have really enjoyed connecting with other women going through the steps that I was, that I could reach out to and say, you know, who else is is doing their medication cycle right now? Who else has had like an injection mishap that like that was painful, or Tara's, gushing blood? Like, has anyone else had that? Just have someone to connect with and say, I'm going through that too. And we do connect all of our surrogates with other surrogates. And so they can join and share stories, because at the end of the day, it's, that's what makes us feel the best, is to be able to connect with other people and have shared experiences and learned experiences, that you can hear about journeys that maybe don't look like yours, and that's okay. And, every journey looks different, and just sharing that and growing that community.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tara and Sarah, for joining us today on Bump to Bond, Giving Tree Surrogacy's podcast. Subscribe to follow along on future episodes as we dive into other various topics in the surrogacy world. And thank you again for joining, and we'll see you again next time.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it just as thought-provoking.